Okay, this is your review of the electromagnetic spectrum. We've been learning about this for about the last week, and we're about to take a quiz on it. So let's take a look at this diagram. The electromagnetic spectrum, you'll recall, is based on the frequency or wavelength of light. The spectrum of light is all of the light that exists. We only see a very small portion called visible light in the center. So when we take a look at the electromagnetic spectrum, when we look at a diagram like this, the first thing we should do is look at how it is labeled. We can see the top part penetrates Earth's atmosphere. Yes, radio waves do. No to microwave and infrared. Yes to visible. And no to ultraviolet, X-ray, and gamma ray. Okay. Then it shows the wavelengths, and those are using scientific notation or exponents to describe that. And then they show the wavelength, so you should see the long waves here going to shorter waves. So the frequency will change as well. We'll get to that. About the size of, and it shows different objects here that it would be about the size of. And then frequency in hertz. How many wavelengths pass a given point in a second? So 10 to the fourth for radio waves, that's 10,000. 10 to the eighth, 10 to the 12th, 10 to the 15th is 1 followed by 15 zeros, all the way to 10 to the 20th and more. So the frequency increases as wavelength decreases. And finally, the temperature of an object that is emitting these types of waves. We'll get into that another time. So how do you read this? Well, let's say I ask you, what is the longest wavelength? What type of wave on the electromagnetic spectrum? Well, you could just look at this and see where the wavelengths, the distance between the crests get longer, and you would say radio wave. What's the shortest wavelength? Gamma rays. What type has the highest frequency? Frequency is down here. You'd look at the largest number, which is 10 to the 20. Gamma rays have the highest frequency. Radio waves have the lowest frequency. What's the only light we can see? That would be visible light. Which brings us to the next topic. How fast do these things go? What goes faster, radio waves or gamma rays? Well, it's a trick question. This is all light. Light travels the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers per second in a vacuum. So every one of these travels the same speed. Every one of them has waves of the same amplitude or height. The only thing different is that they have different frequencies or energy or wavelength. All three of those things are basically saying the same thing. Okay, the longer the wavelength, the less energy it has, the lower the frequency. So the higher the energy, the more dangerous this stuff becomes to the human body. Okay. All right, what are these things used for? Well, let's switch back over to our slideshow if I can. It's not letting me. There we go. Let's go to this. Okay, so these again are the wavelengths of light. I'm going to move this little thing at the bottom, just kind of get it out of the way a little bit. Now this, you can see, you should look at this saying, okay, this goes from shortest wavelength, most energy, to longest wavelength, gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, visible, infrared. Notice infrared is on the same side of the spectrum as red, below the red. Ultraviolet is on the same side as violet, above the violet. Microwaves and radio waves. Okay, we've already talked about that stuff, so let's move on. Let's start with radio waves. What are radio waves used for? Well, it's not that hard. Radio waves are used for radio, AM, FM radio. They're used for television. They're used for remote controls and garage door openers and alarm systems and baby monitors. All right, they have the longest wavelength and lowest energy. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and skip up to the next part. We don't need to know how they're carried. The next one is microwaves. What are microwaves used for? Well, microwaves, they have a shorter wavelength than radio waves, higher frequencies and energy. They travel easily through the atmosphere and they are used in microwave ovens, so they're used to cook foods. Your cell phone uses microwave radio transmissions. Radar, satellite communications, these all use microwaves. Okay, we're going to move on to the next part. Slideshow talked about Doppler radar, what a cell phone does. Finally, infrared. Infrared is what we think of as heat. What's it used for? Remote controls use infrared, thermographs and heat sensing animals. So some animals see infrared, like snakes. They have pit vipers as special pits that detect heat. Infrared cameras. That brings us to visible light. A very small part of the electromagnetic spectrum is visible light. The cones in your eyes, these little cells in the back of your eyes, are able to detect color. We can divide the the visible light into the visible spectrum. And we use an acronym to remember the order of these. We'll start with red. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. We use the name Roy, red, orange, yellow, G, middle initial, Biv is the last name. Roy G. Biv is the way to remember the colors of the visible spectrum, or the rainbow: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. Okay, red light has lower frequency, longer wavelengths, less energy. Violet light has the shorter wavelengths and more energy. Now we move to ultraviolet. Ultraviolet light, this is in sunlight naturally. It's absorbed by our ozone layer, a layer of ozone in our atmosphere. It can be dangerous because ultraviolet light can cause skin cancer. It also causes sunburn. What is ultraviolet used for? Sterilizing equipment. It is used in this classroom in the goggles cabinet. There are ultraviolet bulbs in there to sterilize the lab goggles. It's visible to some insects. Some insects, like bees, can see ultraviolet light. Finally, X-rays. X-rays, you should know, they are able to penetrate tissues and be able to see inside the body. You can see bones, teeth, and so on. Higher energy. And then the highest energy rays are gamma rays. They have the shortest wavelengths, the most energy. They're produced by stars and nuclear explosions. They can penetrate cells and kill cells. They can also cause mutations in the DNA, causing tumors and cancers to grow. They're also used to fight tumors because they can kill the cells in tumors. So gamma ray bursts occur in black holes, and we treat cancer with radiation treatment, and that's gamma radiation. So once again, we start on the electromagnetic spectrum, going from long wavelength, low energy radio waves to microwaves to infrared. Visible light's a very tiny part of what's out there. Ultraviolet, X-rays, and gamma rays. And the relative sizes are shown below and their energies. Hopefully this helps you prepare for your quiz. Good luck.